start in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good day and welcome to another edition of Sharpe Takes. Today on the show, we're still thinking about public education. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? And how do we pay for it? I'm delighted today to have as my guest Jay Hooper, Representative Jay Hooper, who grew up in Brookfield, Vermont, did a fair amount of his education out of the state, and then has returned to do a number of public service forays or work in the state, including getting elected to the state legislature and doing some good work there. So welcome, Jay. It's great to have you here. And so where are we at with education?
Well, Dave, firstly, nice to see you. Thank you for having me on the show. I do appreciate you deeming my work good work. Not everybody maybe would do that, but where are we? We are sleepwalking right now through a conversation that is underdeveloped in education reform. I think the governor put out a pretty lofty proposal, and certainly, well, I would characterize his suggestion of 5 school districts statewide to be a goalpost, sort of a starting point for a conversation. I don't think that the administration is wedded to the 5 district figure. I think that they just wanted to start as low as possible, and starting with, suggesting one school district, like say the state of Hawaii, or as former Representative Larry Copley would always suggest, it's too small. So I think it was a launch point for a conversation that has both not progressed in very many. I mean, it's a slow-moving conversation, which it should be, because we only really have one opportunity to get this right. But I have been arguing since before January that we really need to put education policy material in front of as many committees as possible, and sort of have as many lawmakers digging into the material as we can, so that we have parallel planning and tandem policy development.
And I think that's happened to a certain extent. Commerce was dealing with the Career and Technical Center.
Best example.
Education Committee was dealing with education policy, and the Government Operations Committee looked at districts.
That's right.
And the number I hear floating around from numerous sources is somewhere between 17 and 25.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that as a number of school districts. That
is a range that, yes. So actually, I can tell you with authority that is the preferential range, because you know how the House clerk has a roster of all the names of House members for when we keep track of votes. There's a yes column, a no column, and an absent column. And sometimes I use that as I go around to field preference from my colleagues about these types of questions. And the first couple weeks of the session, I made sure to talk to almost 150 House members about what it is that they would prefer for a number of districts. I would say, listen, have you a preference yet? And if not, do you have a range? That was, in fact, the range that was most typical. Most respondents said exactly 17, because we have 17 career technical education centers in the state. And yes, that committee taking up that work is in fact the best example of another committee doing work at the same time as the House Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee, Senate Finance, House Ways and Means, and so on. Government Operations is the committee that I serve on. For our audience, I'm in my 5th term. I represent the 5 towns of Brookfield, Braintree, Randolph, Granville, and Roxbury. My first term I was on Ag and Forestry, which is now Ag, Forestry, and Food Resiliency. My 2nd and 3rd terms, so 4 years, I spent on your former committee, Mr. Chair, Education, House Education. And then last term, in this one, I'm on House Government Operations and Military Affairs. And it's interesting you mentioned GovOps as one of the committees that kind of has dug into the work. I was one of the lead cheerleaders for yes, we need to map. We need to put the maps in front of these committees, House and Senate Government Operations, and our first joint hearing back in January. I think it was January, maybe early February. We talked about meeting regularly, maybe once a month. I said, if I could have it my way, it'd be every 2 weeks, and then it turned into an agreement that we would meet weekly. Unfortunately, I think we only met 2 additional times from that, so it was a total of 3 over the course of maybe 6 weeks. And we've since stopped meeting, and that's been to my utmost frustration, because my argument has been from the start that it's always going to be maps that steer us along a path.
Does it make sense to have the maps centered around technical centers?
I think it does. Well, you know what? I can't say that, but because so many people instinctively suggest that, I think it's very much worth exploring the answer to that question thoroughly. And I think that committee, House Commerce and Economic Development, is probably doing a fine job, but they have yet to have a bill number. I think the notion that just to update you, the latest bill to come out of House Education, the Ed bill, that I think we're going to see on the House floor on Wednesday and Thursday, says, I think maybe Section 8 or something, it has a subcommittee in it that would have the question of how many school districts should we have in Vermont put to a study committee, a subcommittee of the Commission on the Future of Public Education.
Right, that's what I understand. Yeah.
Right, and it's nice to bring in the experts, but we ought to just bring them right into committee, because we're going to be the ones who have to make the decision. I mean, my argument is we are the subcommittee, lawmakers. We have to make tough decisions. We can't kick from a time perspective, we don't have 5 months to spare. We can't wait for a 40th report on this stuff. Since the year 2000, we've had 39 study committees, summer task forces, working groups. All these different reports have come back to many legislatures in consequence to one, consecutively.
Yeah.
And we've never acted on any of it.
Well, no, I disagree with that.
Please.
I was on the committee back then, and I think the result of some of those studies resulted in Act 46. I think some of them resulted in changes on special ed. Some of those reports resulted in pupil weighting, which you guys did a couple terms ago. So I think it is worth taking the time. Legislators, you're going to be done when? Middle of May?
Well, that's just it. As I've said to my colleagues, anybody who scheduled a vacation, I hope that you're going to be prepared to. I hope you got the refund on the ticket to whatever warm place you might be seeking to go, because it's unknown. I mean, the governor has been clear so far that he intends to bring us back, and Democrats today, I think, are saying, well, that executive order or whatever it is illegal. I think they're arguing, and I would hate to see us challenge that question in the courts. I mean, we might as well just agree to come back, or come up with some policy that he's okay with. To me, it's the partisanship on this doesn't make sense. It's not really a partisan issue, in my opinion. Would you disagree with that?
Well, no, I agree with that. To say that it's a kumbaya issue, though, is also a mistake.
Of course.
I just think the divisions in the legislature are not so much party as they are urban-rural, as they are east and west, and those kinds of divisions within the voting bloc of the legislature that have always made education policy difficult.
Sure.
And aren't going to make this particular policy change any easier.
You're right, and I would agree that it is probably distinctly rural, urban, in terms of if we're talking about a philosophical divide.
Yeah.
How many terms were you in this?
16 years.
So,
Yeah.
so, and you did probably 3 or 4 terms as chair.
2 terms as
2.
chair.
So were you one of the architects of Act 46?
Yes.
Yes.
It was the committee that I was chair of that.
Right.
But I should clarify in that there were 2 voluntary versions of Act 46 leading up to Act 46. So the first voluntary version, there was only one school district that unified in the Londonderry area. The second version of voluntary, there was a district in Chittenden County, I think, that became a unified district. And then Act 46 moved from voluntary to mandatory, was really the big change between the earlier versions of creating unified districts. So that process, I was talking to Speaker Sharpe Smith just the other day. Even that process really took 8 years to move from where we were to move to larger school districts.
Sure.
So to think that we can move from where we are now to larger school districts, particularly if we're talking 17 to 20 school districts, to move in that direction in a couple of years is pretty unrealistic politically.
Yes, very true. But I agree with you when you say it's not just going to be kumbaya. Of course not. This is going to be a really tough conversation pretty much every minute for every person from here until the time we decide we can. The way I put it to a school board the other day was, you'll be hard-pressed to see very many Vermonters, teachers, principals, superintendents, students, parents, give it 2 thumbs up. I think we'll be in good shape if we can get a majority of Vermonters to give it 1. I think that this is a matter of being prepared to all show up to the same table, stay at the table, give an inch so that we can pave a mile.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah.
I'm curious. I know this is you asking me questions, but do you mind if I?
No, go
I
ahead.
have one. So because you were so intimately involved in Act 46, there's been a perspective out there that I think I disagree with, and I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are. The notion that consolidation does not create savings, I think, is a misnomer. I think that that's an unsubstantiated claim, because Act 46 didn't create the savings that we hoped. Would you agree?
To some extent, I think what happened was we improved efficiency, and money that was saved, particularly in administrative costs, was redirected to student needs, particularly through the COVID and the mental health challenges that students have faced. So, so yes, in a sense, Act 46 saved money. Was it reflected in tax rates? No, because that money was desperately needed in other areas of education. And I would, looking at Act 46 in hindsight, it's nice to have hindsight and vision sometimes. I think we took a lot of testimony that consolidation of schools needed to happen at the high school level, and a lot of people said that, and some even said specifically which high schools should be closed. And just this morning in a legislative breakfast, someone mentioned that there were 3 high schools in Rutland County within 7 miles of each other.
Yes, and they're smaller compared.
Yeah, 2 of them graduate like fewer than 20 students.
Right.
So
Proctor,
not at least having a conversation about or creating, what we didn't do was we didn't create a process for them to have a conversation and come together with the notion of having one high school for that area.
Right.
And we did sort of think that we would go in that direction if we put protections for small elementary schools, which we did. didn't quite work that way.
Right.
So now we're still facing the same demographic challenges, and it is more focused on what's happening at the high school level.
As it should be, I think, right? I mean, did I send you that map the other day? I had a map I basically took a blank map of all 255 townships in Vermont, and I took the 55 high schools, public high schools that exist in this state, and I ranked them from largest to lowest.
Yes, I saw that map.
Enrollment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I took the top 14, put them in green, so every school that has 700 students or more.
Yeah.
And then I took the next 14, which was all the schools between 400 and 650 students. And then the next 13, which was 450 or fewer. And then I think the last 13 was 300 students or fewer. And I ranked them by green, blue, yellow, and pink highlighter. So you could see geographically how near each school is to the others and which is in which bracket for enrollment. And so I think as we inch by inch move forward on where do we lay bricks on the path to the future of public education, we should be thinking about newer, fewer, larger, more well-rounded public regional high schools. And they should be community schools. So I brought for you a gift, Dave.
Great.
This I hope will serve as the DMZ, the demilitarized zone for politicians on the left and right who don't wish to interface with each other. This I hope will be a bill that we put pages towards over the next several years, because it is a lot of macro concepts that basically layer existing infrastructure and say these are the things to explore as we answer questions that we don't know we have to answer yet.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my mantras has been there's only one future to public education in Vermont, and we don't know what it is yet. The only way we figure that out is if everybody helps.
Yeah. Participates in
Totally.
a conversation, puts their 2 cents worth in, so to speak, and moves the discussion forward.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I've had this notion, I actually presented it to both the Education Committee and the Commerce Committee, that for Addison County, now I know less now than I did when I was in the legislature, partly because the landscape has changed, and I just don't stay in touch as much.
Sure.
In Addison County, we already have a county-wide school district.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the Hannaford School District. So if we had a single school district for all the 9 through 12 students in the county, that school district would currently run the Middlebury High School, Virgins, Bristol High Schools, and the Tech Center. Have a single budget, and students could move seamlessly from an academic program to the Tech Center programs. Sure. It does not provide for construction of a new building.
Right.
I don't think all the students could be moved into Middlebury, but that could happen organically over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, one of the things I put in this bill is targeted population growth along with climate resiliency. I mean, I think when we talk about equity, we don't want to favor certain regions over others, but we do have to be realistic about how we analyze school construction, the costs that have been deferred since 2007, as you know.
Yeah.
When we think about the profile of our buildings, which ones are too far gone? Which ones should we be trying to figure out a good public-private partnership to transition those buildings into some new use that is useful to the community and the local economy while we consider whereabouts and in what order we build new buildings?
Yeah.
And how soon?
And I would say, at least in Addison County, I think all the school buildings in the county are looking at significant maintenance / construction costs. If you lump those all together, it's a big bill.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if we can make smarter decisions, I'd like to see a single high school, and I'm going to describe it as a comprehensive high school that includes tech center programs and academic programs for the county. That won't come anytime soon unless we have, Bezos come to town and give us $1 billion, right?
Well, maybe we've got some persuasive folks up here. Maybe we can get in touch. The oligarchy we live in. Well, it's funny you say that because I think the term comprehensive schools, I'm curious to explore more because I've heard it, I think 2 weeks in a row now. Dave, but for your audience, I've got a radio program out of Randolph every Saturday morning. I do a live interview. And this past Saturday, I had our current Lieutenant Governor, John Rogers, to extend something of a conversation about, well, he used the term comprehensive schools, so did the week prior's guest, former Lieutenant Governor Doug Racine. And I'm thinking it's probably pretty similar to the term that I use quite regularly, which is the community schools model. I have Representative Kath James of Manchester to thank for introducing me to the concept in my first, probably about 5 years ago. And I'm a little bit surprised when I searched community schools on the legislative website, no single piece of policy came up. I was surprised that key buzzword was not, or phrase was not included in any written policy. So hence H495, the bill that I put in, a couple weeks ago, just to kind of fix that problem. I mean, Democrats and Republicans, I think, will be able to jive with community schools as a sort of long-term destination if we think about between 5 years and 15 years from now what we want our education landscape to look like. And I totally agree with you that it should be sort of something like what you just described, but you want to see in which town a new high school?
In the center of the county.
Yeah.
I don't really care. It's got to be accessible. I think there are issues that have to be dealt with: transportation costs and building construction costs and what actually works. That going to take work to figure that out. If we continue to lose students, I think it's possible that this new school district could fit all the high school students in Middlebury High School.
Well, and I think that as we take our time with a conversation, like I say, that I think is sort of developing sort of slowly, but, a lot of people, most lawmakers in Montpelier think it's either moving too slow or too fast. I think that it doesn't so much matter as long as we stay committed to the work from here until we have a plan. And that's why I don't like to see study committees, because, you can't really make the argument that we need to take all the time in the world when we're not taking the time. We've got committees across the map, bailing out at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday. Not just, taking half days on Fridays. I've been arguing we have to meet on Mondays. We have to maximize our legislative calendar so that we can get down to business. I mean, if you're, let's say, take the squares analogy. Let's say there are, if we're in square 1 or 2 and there are 40 squares to go, we're going to find ourselves getting to square 5 and then jumping to square 8 and then returning to square 6. As the the conversation is going to take a lot of different turns, and it might even return to certain places that we thought we had abandoned because we learned that this path is not viable versus this path. Jill Briggs Campbell, I think it was Friday, said in her testimony in House Education, there's not just one path. And what I think she means to say is that, you have to have conversations develop. I've been using a train track analogy. We have to build tracks alongside, parallel to each other, such that we are kind of creating a nexus for merger.
Along that line of thinking,
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I restricted my comments to Addison County is I think that Addison County is quite different than Metro Burlington, where there's numerous high schools, 2 tech centers. It's Vermont's urban area.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's quite different from the St. Johnsbury region with 2 private academies, Linden and St. Johnsbury Academy. Both have tech programs. Both are run as private schools. So I think, just looking at those 3, Addison, Burlington, and St. Johnsbury, the answer long term for what's best for the education of children in those communities might look different, because they're definitely demographically and geographically different areas.
I'm going to take you a step further, if you don't mind. I think we can go ahead and guarantee they will look different. There are no 2 districts that are the same in this state. And I think that when we think about comprehensive or community schools, we have to think about all the nuances, all of them that exist in each of the different clusters of towns as we think about how we draw new lines for new school boards and depending on how large they are, what it looks like to draw wards within them, and all the implications for elections that would come with those changes. I agree with you that the timeline, I think you were probably alluding to the governor's suggested timeline, is too eager, too rapid. But like I say, the point that we still have to put as much
Effort.
time and effort. We have to put this in as many, put time and space to the question.
So let's change for a moment into finance. The proposal, as I understand it, this morning from Representative Conlon, is going to be, it's going to hit the floor in the next couple of days, is going to be a so-called enhanced foundation formula.
Right.
The question in my mind, which Representative Conlon was not clear about, because it's not public yet anyway, or not settled yet, is there are going to be districts. It doesn't matter what number you pick. There are going to be districts that want to spend more, and how that money is raised in a way that meets Brigham, that is equitable in some way across the state, is going to be a challenge, don't you think?
Oh, I think certainly. I think that's the number one challenge. But I also think that we should not be timid about how we see the conversation develop. I think we have to sort of, when you go fishing, sometimes you let the fish swim around with the hook a little bit to get stuck, right? We have to let that kind of happen instead of trying to guardrail where the conversation may or may not go, what we're allowed to talk about, because I think it's probably a fairly safe assumption to think that the courts will engage with whatever policy it is that we come up with, because somebody is going to sue.
Is going to object.
Yes,
and take it to court.
This will be the type of thing that the courts prioritize. It's not like we're going to sit around waiting for a verdict. The courts will address it, and we have to not be afraid of that. I think we have to be prepared strategically, particularly as we think about the things that we value ideologically, especially as the majority party, Democrats. We have to think about what it is that we don't have to redline things, but I figure we got to have a short list of things that we cherish and wish to protect at all costs, which means engaging strategically, not disengaging.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. The half hour just goes so fast.
It sure does. We both enjoy it.
You have some great ideas, and I'm
you.
grateful for your work in the legislature. I think all legislators put in extraordinary amount of work for the amount of pay they get.
Sure.
And are serving our state well. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate that, Dave. And because you were a former chair of the committee, did you have Peter Conlon on this show? Is that how you?
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to say to him and to his cohorts on his committee that I think you guys do diligent and thoughtful work. for as much as it might seem like I'm criticizing it. I appreciate all of them. I hope that we can come up with something that Democrats and Republicans can embrace.
Yeah, great. So thank you very much
Very
for
good.
coming.
Good to see you.
Take care.
Yeah.
And that's it for another version of Sharpe Takes.